Demons are like obedient dogs. They come when they are called.
From when I was 3 to 10 years old, my family lived in a tiny, second-floor walk-up apartment in a large city. Our apartment was long and narrow, and my family had to walk through my bedroom to get to the bathroom, so it was a cramped lifestyle, to say the least. Around when I turned 8, my parents decided to offer me a bit of privacy, asking me if I wanted to move into a separate bedroom that had its own entrance and exit from the entry stairwell. It was extremely small, basically a closet, but I was eager to move in there because it was private and at least away from my parents and baby brothers. From the very first night they moved my bed into this room, I saw a very dark, shadowy presence fading in and out of the wall. It had no eyes, but razor teeth. Its mouth opened to silently scream. I thought I was going crazy. I never told another soul about it. I saw it nearly every night for 2 years. It was tall and thin and a living shadow. That's all I can do to describe it. The walls were plastered with children's animal-themed wallpaper from the previous owners. If I recall, it had strange little toy animals, repeated over and over. Because of the bizarre events happening in that room, this innocent decor seemed ominous. My mother would occasionally come into my room to check on me, and I would be soaked through my pajamas in my own sweat from hiding under the cheap blankets. I was petrified of that room. I was living in hell, but I had no options, because my baby brothers now slept in my old room. I became sleep-deprived and unhealthy. I think my teachers might have commented on my deteriorating mental state to my parents. Over that time, I became obsessed with the occult and paranormal. Now that I'm over 50 years old, I feel like that same shadowy entity is still inside me and has been with me my entire life. Could I be possessed by it?
My entire life, I was followed around multiple states from my childhood to adulthood. I'm not sure who or what it was, but it always found me. It seemed to be trying hard to make me extremely uncomfortable. I was a Christian as a kid, and whenever I used religious calls, prayers and phrases, it would go away for a while. I spent most of my life pretending not to notice anything. Things moving, a weight on my bed next to me, strange sounds when it was quiet. I eventually lost my belief in Judeo-Christianism and was given advice by a pagan friend on how to get rid of it. Most of the advice was a huge lifestyle and personality change. Stay positive, know your power over them, and eliminate unnecessary worry and fear. It worked. It took practice, but it worked completely. She explained to me that religion is usually used in these situations because it is total belief. Belief strengthens intent. But if you have strong intent without belief, it is exactly the same. Either way, my problem was solved for a while. I ended up getting married and having kids. That made things start happening again in whichever home we lived. I noticed that it was much more difficult to fight negative with positive when there are 5 other people in your home to add to the negative. I can't make them change the way I had to as a young adult. Since then, I've seen signs of activity and immediately turned up my protection a notch. The activity goes away but comes back if I let my guard down. It's been back and forth, and I've always handled it pretty well. But about a week ago I had my first nightmare in years. My youngest daughter and wife also had nightmares that night. I immediately noticed the signs and took my usual steps to make it go away again. It hasn't been working, and the next night I was in the kitchen late at night and my dog started growling, baring teeth, and had his hair standing on end. He's literally never done this. I've had him for 7 months and never heard him growl unless he's playing with a toy with our other dog. The same night when I was putting my daughter to sleep, she looked over to the window, glared and then grabbed onto me and squeezed. She kept trying to sneak peeks back over there. The blinds were drawn and the windows were closed. This was the 3rd time that day that I saw her staring at nothing, confused and scared. She's been falling over a lot more lately, sometimes bruising herself. Last night, I told my wife about these signs and asked her to try and stay positive. Stop stressing so much, the basics. This is not the first time we've had these conversations, and she agreed and understood. We went to sleep and I slept horribly. My wife told me about half hour ago that at 2 a.m.-ish, my daughter was sleeping on our bed at the foot, which she doesn't usually do because she loves to snuggle, and she started screaming horribly. She wasn't moving any part of her body, like it was being held still for her. Her eyes were wide open and she was just screaming bloody murder. I'm at work, but my first instinct is to haul us home and confront it like I have done in the past. But I'm not in the right state to do so, and I'm just too angry, and that'll only feed it. My real problem is, I think I've passed a piece of it to my daughter, like a GD virus. The techniques I've been using for 7 years aren't working anymore, and I don't know what to do. I have 2 teenagers and a very stressed out wife. The negativity in my house is off the charts, and if anyone has any advice, I'd certainly appreciate it.
This was a few years ago. I purchased my childhood home with my husband. The first couple of years we had a toxic roommate who would put us against each other. Over time he ended up staying in his room all the time, falling into a depression. He found a boyfriend and moved out. I wasted no time turning the spare room into a guest quarters. I started having horrible insomnia, so to allow my husband to sleep undisturbed, I moved to the guest room. This is where things got dark. I finally found a healthy sleeping pattern that was working for me and getting real sleep. That's when the nightmares started. A clown was in the closet, but not any clown. A demonic, evil, twisted clown. Side note, I am not afraid of clowns in the slightest. He kept telling me that I was to be his bride, and that I needed to kill everyone I loved in order to bring him fully into this world. And in my nightmares, I would plan with him and agree. I would wake up, and the closet door, which had been closed and latched with an old school hook and eye latch, would be wide open, and everything in it disheveled. I feared the ex-roommate's depression had opened a doorway for darkness to enter, as he was in a vulnerable state when he occupied the room. After weeks and weeks of these nightmares every night, I decided to cleanse the house. I opened the front door and burned sage. My husband and I both have indigenous ancestry, so the burning of sage is a cleanse our ancestors held sacred. I started in the attic, making certain the smoke touched even the darkest corners, and cleansed room by room. When I began in the spare room, the light bulb exploded. The doorknobs rattled. I did not stop. I pushed until I felt the energy leave the house. My husband, who was outside with our dog, knew when it was over. I never said a word because he saw the darkness shoot out the front door. We've had no issues since. The nightmares stopped immediately. The closet door remained closed and latched. But I will never forget the hopelessness and darkness I felt in those dreams. I will never know why it showed itself to me, as a clown.
I live with my dad, sister and cousin. My cousin is male and 16 years old, and for some reason decided to summon some demons for wealth, good mental health and one thing or another. This was about 1.5 years ago, and I was completely unaware of this until he started talking about some weird dreams he'd been having. He then described all the exact details of the dream, beside being in different locations of the house that I had a few nights before, and that's when I got really worried. Here's the dream. So I start in the dream in my room, which is at the top level of my 3-story house. And I have an impending doom feeling, so I look down to my stairs and there it is. A dark shadow standing halfway down them, so I run at it, trying to run past it to get downstairs. And for some reason I stop right in front of it, feeling the worst burning inside, an impending doom feeling I've ever experienced. And it just morphs into a dark shadow cat. Then I kind of snap out of it and start running to the basement of the house, all while it's following me. I get to my dad's room and start beating on the door and screaming, trying to get him to open it. And everything just slowly starts to lose sound as the cat comes closer, and I'm screaming but no sound comes out. Then I woke myself up from a whimpering type scream, and my cousin said he had the exact same dream. But it started at his room, which is the basement as well. The shadow person morphs. He beats on my dad's door and the cat rubs against his leg and he wakes up. If that wasn't strange enough on its own, he has started to hear voices calling his name, getting closer and louder each time, telling him to wake up, even when he's at school and away from home. And today he went to walk to the buses and there was a humanish shadow figure standing near a barn, accompanied by the sound of thumping that got louder and louder. He said he tries to call out to it, but it wouldn't respond, and it set off the motion detector lights at the barn, and it just still remained a dark, shadowy figure. The thumping continued to get louder, until it just stopped, and the figure just disappeared. That has been pretty much how it's been for a while. I have other odd experiences as well. But my question is, does anyone know what it is? And if there's any way that I can protect myself from it, or make it go away?
On November 25th, at 4 a.m, I woke up in a panic. I have been having sleep paralysis this whole month. It happens every November, and whenever I'm stressed. This time was different though. I woke up and was able to pull out of my sleep paralysis fairly quickly. But I felt this intense feeling of something staring at me with deep hatred. I sat up fast and looked around my room, something I never do. Usually, after having a sleep paralysis episode, I dig deeper into my covers because it's frightening. But this time, I felt scared and in danger. At the doorway of my room was this 8 to 10 foot tall thing. It had a goat head, I don't remember seeing horns on it, and a gorilla body. I grabbed my phone and turned the flashlight on and shined it. I didn't feel brave enough to shine it at its face, but illuminated it enough to see its body and a bit of its face. I saw enough and screamed, a long scream. To be honest, I purposely screamed for a long time so my dad would come and save me, embarrassingly enough. Luckily my parents lived with me and my dad did end up barging into my room. He stayed at the doorway for a second, scanning my room, then ran in. When he ran in, he ran through the demon-looking thing. It grimaced when my dad walked through it, and it dispersed. My dad ended up hugging me for a little bit, before we had a sleepover in the living room with the cats. I know I'm too damn old to have my dad hugging me to sleep. 30, female. But that thing looked frightening. My dad is nearing 60, and very into Catholicism, almost to an extreme, as he grew up seeing what his grandmother had to go through as a curandera, a village healer. He says he sees a lot of ghosts and demons. He always has his prayer music on. He wasn't always like this. He always said he could see the supernatural, but he wasn't religious before. He got into a really stressful situation a few years ago, and all of this magnified to where he is now. And to be honest, I thought this was religious psychosis. I'm not religious at all, as the Catholic Church traumatized me growing up. And honestly, I was really hoping all these ghosts, shadows, demons I was seeing was just an overactive REM cycle, or my mind filling in the blanks. But this goat head, gorilla body thing looked so real and freaked me out when the flashlight didn't make it go away. Any thoughts on this? Edit. A year ago when I first got my house, I fell asleep on the floor of my room because I didn't have any furniture yet. I fell asleep to some frequency sounds, and during the night, it must have skipped over to another video. The video was a picture of a priest praying with a Bible at a group of people, maybe demons. It was a reddish picture from what I can remember. The sound was a priest chanting an exorcist prayer in Latin. This didn't wake me up. What did wake me up was something that tapped my foot twice. I woke up and heard that chanting, and it spooked me, and I turned it off. I was hoping that tapping was just a nervous tick, like my foot twitching or something. But now, I'm wondering about that experience, too.
Back in 2015, I had this experience that made me realize the world is a stranger place than I thought it was. It was around 8 p.m. and I was coming back home from the movies. I dashed my foot against a stone and my body started to run against my will. A supernatural force had hijacked my legs that made me sprint extraordinarily. I finally managed to halt and walk normally after being played with for about 2 kilometers, which is a long way. As I tried to gather some sense of what happened, I saw something unusual in front of me. Near the signpost of an SDA church that I was a member of, there was a glowing shadow, a diabolical silhouette that just appeared, and what made it creepy was that its half was waist downwards, and it had no upper body. I was struck with fright. I knew my mind could not just make up such things, it was real. I started chanting Jesus' name several times, and I approached a stranger by the shops and rhapsodized to him what I'd seen and requested him to accompany me to our gate. I didn't even see his face because it was so dark. He was not even shocked by my narration. I did not disclose anything to my parents as we had supper, but Dad noticed my unusual stillness. We prayed and departed to sleep, and that is where my nightmares began. I could not catch a wink of sleep. I tried to kill time by reciting an SDA fundamental belief about Jesus and Christians having power over the forces of darkness. This really calmed me down. Then late into the night I felt an ominous presence. The dog outside started barking and flapping its ears, and whenever that happened I got physically attacked by a force so strong that it was pressing down on me, as if it wanted to gain entry into my body. I later thought it was the upper part of the demon that also wanted to inhabit me. I sweated, cried, and prayed under my blankets as I longed for sunrise. It was the longest night ever. The next day I realized that my legs were unusually stiff, and that they could literally just walk up a hill or hop to a spot without me putting effort in. I had been possessed by a half-genie. My cousin had also commented on my unusual speed when I ran. We were together, watering cattle at a river, when I decided to exorcise the pesky demon. I immersed myself in the water and read out a scripture from my pocket testament. When I reached home, I washed my hands, which were also possessed wrist downwards, and I knew this because I had to hold a pen, and the handwriting was terrible. Whenever I tried to write Holy Spirit, it's almost as if my hand would deny me. I also wetted my lower half, poured the contaminated water and got ready for the genie to be expelled. Not sure if I was stimulating a voice of an angel in my head or if it was real, but I started the process and began convulsing. My thigh muscles contracted severely, so did my hands, and something told me to count to 700, and my frozen hands could be set free. I don't know what could have happened if anybody had busted in during this weird stuff. But when I finished, that was that. I was very glad to be relieved of whatever the hell that was.
I think it started with the nightmares. I've had a history in the past with ghosts and ghouls. A ghost attached itself to my brother when we were younger, and would angrily throw things. We named her Cadence. My sister said Cadence would play hide and seek with her, showing up in the corner of her eye, only to duck out of view and my sister would turn to look at her. When I moved out at 16, Cadence did not follow me. This is something different, more negative. It started earlier this week, like I said, with the nightmares. The first one was about Kisaragi Station. If you don't know what that is, look it up. I encountered many people at the station, and when I got on, I arrived at a giant field with a dog. I don't remember after that. I also don't remember the second nightmare. The third, however, was yesterday night. In it, I was being chased through a small portal under some stairs. Writing this now, I'm realizing my last apartment had a staircase with a giant hole under it. My cat ran under there once, and I felt nearly feral with primal fear that gripped me when I got close to the hole. The person chasing me was a cannibal. I don't know how I knew. I just knew. We eventually came to a standoff. I was so close to her, but just out of her sight. She was looking away, but all she had to do was turn. And that's what she did. She turned slowly, eyes wide as she stared at me. I stared back in complete terror. She saw me and reached out to me, gripping my hand harshly. I woke up slowly, filled with chest-crunching terror. I could still feel the woman's grip on my hand as I woke up, nearly crushing my fingers. For context, I sleep curled up every night, sometimes on my back, but never with my hand anywhere near the edge of my full-sized bed. I woke up with my hand dangling off the side of my bed, reaching out. I felt eyes on me from the closet and stared. With complete certainty, the only thought I had was demon. Spooked to hell, I stayed awake and considered asking my Catholic roommate to bless my room, or at least the apartment. Silly, right? But my roommate had done it before, and it was all fine. Until my cat broke their Mary statue. After the statue broke, the smells started, like something rotted in our apartment. My roommate's senior cat started getting nervous too. She used to never meow. She meows constantly now, and one time we even heard her on the other side of the apartment building while we were checking the mail. We just heard her screaming. Confused, we rushed back to our apartment on the other floor and opened our apartment door to find the cat staring at the door and practically howling. This morning, we found a huge blood stain on my roommate's pillow. Frowning, I checked her cat over because we thought maybe the cat had bled on it. She was spotless. My roommate shrugged it off and washed the bloodstain off. Is this a demon? Can anyone give me some guidance on how to handle this? Update 1. Here I'll answer some of the more common questions. I'm not Catholic or Japanese. I'm actually native, and for the past 4 years I've been working hard on my journey of converting to Judaism. It seemed so strange to me that a possible entity, as my roommate and I have taken to calling it in private, would target me, native and, as of right now, not aligned to a religion, especially not Catholicism, as opposed to my religious roommate. My roommate joked that maybe it was because this entity could smell the holiness on them, as opposed to me. I joked that that would make them all the more tempting, wouldn't it? I talked with some of my friends and looked over all of your advice, pondering what to do. In the end, with the help of my roommate, we covered all the mirrors in the house, specifically the one positioned directly across from my bed, left there by the previous tenants and glued to the wall. And my roommate created a splint for their Mary statue and covered her in holy water. They then holy watered the apartment. My roommate's godfather is a pastor, or priest, I'm not sure which is where they got the holy water. Strangely enough, the entity did not feel angry. My room, more specifically, my closet, felt as if it were pouting more than anything. The entity isn't mad about what my roommate and I have done. It seems more annoyed and petulant. My friend suggested that maybe I leave some snacks out for it, to say that I meant no harm. I told him that interacting with it was the last thing I really wanted to do. Sleeping last night was strange, even if I didn't have a nightmare. Well, even if I didn't have a nightmare. My roommate, on the other hand, was not so lucky, and playfully complained to me that I had handed them the nightmare stick. I tried to sleep before my roommate, just for my own peace of mind. Unfortunately, I just couldn't. I curled up facing away from my closet, and even though a heat wave had just hit that day, I refused to come out of my blanket cocoon. Even as I started overheating severely, I just tried to sleep. But I could feel its eyes on me, just staring, annoyed, like I was being ridiculous. As I settled down, I kept getting flashes in my mind of grinning teeth and staring eyes. Although, even I can admit that I know that the brain does weird things when the body is falling asleep, especially as hopped up on fear as I was. I didn't manage to sleep then, unfortunately. I knew if I tried again, I wouldn't be able to get to sleep before 3 a.m. And I did not want to be trying to sleep at 3 a.m. Call me superstitious. So I hatched a plan. I would simply stay up past 3 a.m. and go to sleep at 4 a.m. so that this entity wouldn't inflict me with nightmares. And, well, it worked. It hit 4 a.m. on the dot, and I shut my laptop down. I took my headphones off. It was so silly. I couldn't help but laugh quietly to myself. I turned over and went to sleep and dreamed about the heatwave. More recent update. Hi. It has been quite a few months since I moved out. It was a carbon monoxide leak. I had been stewing in carbon monoxide for months. Everybody, please check your carbon monoxide alarms. I'm all good now. Thank you all so much for the support. Just a note from Papa. Even though the author of this one did tell me it was a carbon monoxide leak, I thought it was a good story and a good warning to everyone to check for things like carbon monoxide leaks before jumping to conclusions. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you all so much for listening. If you have a story you'd like to share with the channel, please send it to my email, which will be found in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel, consider signing up for my Patreon, which you can watch my videos ad-free and usually with bonus stories, as well as other perks depending on the level. This year, I will be redesigning my merch store, so keep an eye out for that one. And as always, the biggest thank you is to all of you. I truly appreciate all of your support over the last couple of years. And remember,
Papa loves you.